Hey guys, Dorki here. It's been a while since my last video, but with 9.1's release date announced, I've been getting a lot of questions about the new M plus meta or where's the best tank. As with any of these meta or tier list videos, I'll always mention that it is so important for you guys to be playing what you are comfortable with or good at. Example being, if you're insane at Brewmaster and you enjoy it way more than playing a Demon Hunter, just stick with playing Brew instead. Also, this only applies for M plus and not Raid. Raid is completely different. I'll start with tank first, since most of you watching are probably tank players. So what has changed with tanks? Honestly, almost nothing has changed going from this patch into 9.1. Blood Decay received a small 6% damage buff, which is very little considering how far behind Blood Decay is. The only new legendary that might be worth considering is the new Kyrian Paladin legendary. New anima powers from the Tormented affix will help some tanks, but nothing too major. The notable ones are the Stygian Barb power, which does % health damage, and the 25% magic DR power. The Barb power means that some tanks will gain a tiny bit more damage than other tanks, and the 25% magic DR means that certain tanks like Prot Warriors may not have to worry as much about magic damage. Basically, tanks will be the same for the most part. The best tanks will be Bear, Vengeance, and Prot Warrior. Bear will be the strongest tank overall as shown in the Great Push. Vengeance will excel in some dungeons and probably be more Pug or Lord Key friendly. Prot Warriors will be similar to Vengeance where it might not be the strongest tank overall, but will be really good for most players. The thing with Bear Tank is that it only really excels when you're doing larger pulls, like the pulls we've seen in the Great Push. However, for most of you guys out there, Warrior and Vengeance will be better if you're doing more conservative pulls and not doing any crazy bear pulls. I predict that we'll see more bears overall, but Vengeance will most likely be the most popular tank. More players will be playing Vengeance just because of how much more useful they are in raid progression, and Demon Hunter being a more popular class in general. Warrior is a really fun spec that is heavily underrated. It might not be as tanky as Bear overall or handle magic damage as well as Vengeance, but it can easily perform at a similar level for most players. Just below these tanks are Brew and Prot Paladin. Even though I say they're below, it's not that big of a difference. These two tanks can feel a bit squishy compared to the top 3 tanks, but of course if you play really well and surviving isn't an issue, they're completely fine. They both do amazing damage, bring great utility, and have been shown to be capable of doing the highest keys. And as usual, Blood Decay is looking to be the weakest tank just because of their lack of damage and reliability. I honestly think that Blood Decay is super tanky, it just doesn't do enough damage to make them a top contender. With tanks, it'll always be take the player over the class. Next up are healers. This will also be nearly the same as before. Holy Paladins are still the highest damage healers by a large margin, making them the best choice for the highest keys. Paladins actually received a massive nerf, which is roughly a 15% damage loss to the overall. While this might look like a lot, we have to keep in mind that Holy Paladins were so far ahead to begin with that 15% nerf isn't nearly enough to bring them down. After Holy Paladins, the rest of the healers are pretty close, with Resto Shaman being the closest. Resto Shamans have the second highest damage and crazy amounts of healing as shown in the first season. Priest is still highly valued for power infusion, monks have gotten decent sized buffs that'll help them, but it's similar to the Blood Decay situation where the class just has too little damage to begin with. Resto Druid is also a really solid healer. And just like with tanks, it's super important that you value the player over the class. If anything, I think the safer healer like Resto Shaman will be more important to have than a Holy Paladin. And for the vast majority of players, it's so much more important that a healer can keep the group alive, rather than having a high damage healer that can't really keep the group alive. Lastly, for DPS, a lot of you might be disappointed, but it'll stay relatively the same. As shown in the Great Push, there is no perfect 3 DPS meta comp. There will be various really good DPS depending on the dungeons and the pulls that your team does. So starting with the current meta DPS, Ala Rogue is looking really strong, if not stronger, just because of how the changes to routing and potentially needing more shrouds. In the Tormented affix, it's very important to rush straight for the offensive powers. Fire Mage, even though it's received massive nerfs, is still one of the best uncapped AoE classes with unmatched burst. It's similar to Holy Paladins where even after it received a really large nerf, it stays really competitive because of how far ahead they were to begin with. Frost Mage will be a really good contender because of the higher sustained damage it does. Personally, I don't think Frost Mage will overtake Fire in most situations, but it'll do comparable if not more damage. Frost Mage doesn't bring Dragon's Breath or uncapped AoE or massive on-demand burst from combustion. As for Boomkins, even though they received heavy nerfs, they are still way too valuable to not be considered meta DPS. There's still a lot of speculation whether Boomkins are still worth playing or not, just because of how there's various DPS that can do more damage than Boomkin, but losing out on the Boomy utility is still debatable. Now for the classes that have been on the rise. Ali Shaman will definitely be a meta DPS. This class easily has the best AoE in the game at the moment. Sustained AoE, burst AoE, uncapped AoE. The class is built to do overall damage. It also has insanely good utility ranging from a 12-second cooldown range kick to various totems like Cap Totem, Earthbind, and Tremor. It also has a Decurse, which is super valuable in the Rev and Draft dungeons. It's got a knock and Primal Earth LE for helping with tanking. The class is also super tanky and has crazy off healing from Healing Stream Totem, Ancestral Guidance, Fate Transfusion, or just spamming Healing Surge. Combining AG and Transfusion actually lets you instantly top your group to full. The amount of off healing it does is actually very noticeable on hard bosses like the ones in Sanguine Depths or the other side. The only major drawback with Ali Shaman is their average at best single target damage. Compared to other classes, Ali Shaman generally does a bit lower than most meta DPS. The class is also very fun and will probably be seen in every single top group. Two more classes I would like to mention are Windwalkers and Demon Hunters. Windwalkers have been doing insane AoE damage for a while now while providing crazy good utility. The only major drawbacks are their average single target and being a melee class. However, in any comps with a rogue or high physical damage like Elemental Shaman's Earthquake, a Windwalker brings a lot because of their Mystic Touch. Demon Hunters have been buffed, and with the rise to non-vengeance tanks, Havoc's Chaos Brand should help with caster groups. I don't think these two DPS will be seen nearly as much as the others, but they are definitely good enough to be considered in a quote-unquote meta comp. There are still various other specs I've seen performing really well, like Shadow Priest, Warlocks, Hunters, and DKs. It's just very unlikely that we'll be seeing them in the highest keys going into 9.1. So to sum things up, 9.1 will mostly reflect what we've seen in the Great Push. The top specs have definitely been taken down a notch, putting them closer to the other classes, but not nearly enough to cause them to reroll to another spec. Hopefully this will satisfy everyone's what is the best class question for 9.1. Anytime you guys see that question being asked, just let them know that it doesn't matter too much unless you're doing really high keys, or just send them this video. Also, keep in mind that the meta might look like this right now, but there's still more tuning to come. We should wait until the heroic week of the Sanctum raid for Blizzard to tune the specs some more. However, it is a bit unlikely that we'll get much balancing for M+, just because Blizzard heavily balances around raid. Anyways, with 9.1 coming out, I'll be uploading more videos and updating the routes. I'll still be playing Bear and probably leveling up my Demon Hunters to have more tanks ready. Let me know if there's any particular video you guys want on 9.1 stuff. As always, thanks for watching, like and subscribe, we've got more to come.